Okay, I guess we're live. Yes, we are live. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I'm not sure who is here. I want to start out by saying if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. We are streaming to YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn, so it's very exciting. I'm Vivian Judah Frankel, and I'm the host of the Compounding Pharmacy podcast by PharmaSalon. PharmaSalon creates content and conferences for the compounding pharmacy industry. I'm thrilled to announce that at the beginning of the new year, our podcast and our YouTube videos are going to be available for CE credits for both pharmacists and technicians. You can find all of our videos and our podcast at compoundingpharmacies.com. And of course, you can go directly to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/PharmaSalon. Today we have with us Abby Roth. Thank you so much for joining us. And she's going to be talking about an article that she wrote about garbing and certifier behavior. Abby, why don't you introduce yourself?
All right, thanks, Vivian. My name is Abby Roth. Right now, I'm the Senior Director of Business Operations for Critical Point. So we do a lot of teaching and education for the sterile compounding industry, especially with things related to operations and behavior. And prior to that, I had worked as a quality director at a microbiology lab who serviced 797 and other GMP organizations.
Excellent. So I was told about your article by somebody I was talking to when I was planning one of our events, and he said it was a really important topic. We were talking about things that were good for the podcast, just doing some of my basic research. And he, like I said, he mentioned this and he said that I should reach out to you. Can you tell me a little bit about what prompted the article? Was there a specific incident, or is it a trend that you were seeing, so what made you write this?
So there's been kind of just a long history of there being potential microbial contamination coming from the certifier when they come in to do the viable sampling. So where I kind of came from, which was being in the lab, I did a lot of kind of consulting between the pharmacy and the certifier and where's this contamination coming from and why it's showing up. And this has just been ongoing. And it's kind of interesting when I help pharmacies now and I look at their EM data and they're like, what do you think's going on? We can't be that dirty. And I'm like, look, based on your results here, I'm pretty sure there's some other kind of contamination risk going on. And unfortunately, a lot of times it does get traced back to the person doing the sampling, which is likely their certification company. So kind of being at the interface of all of that, I felt like this was a really good topic to give the certifier some specifics, because we talk to them all the time, like, hey, you got to do a good job garbing and you got to do this and you got to do that, but we're not really specific with what we're expecting them to do when they're on site.
Mm-hmm. So so first, maybe we should say where you can read the full article. Where can they find it?
So for anybody that's a CETA member out there, or if your certifier is a CETA member, this was in CETA's performance review. So it's a publication that comes out twice a year through CETA.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Do you want to kind of just recap a little bit then some of the key things that you think are worth emphasizing in the article?
Sure. So I really wanted to focus on just some of the behavioral things that are important, how we move, how we act, what we do in there. But kind of beyond that, the main focus was personal hygiene. And that gets to be a really hard thing to talk about, especially if it's the pharmacy having to talk with, their provider, and maybe one of the individuals that was on site from their provider maybe didn't have kind of the best of what we're looking for from that. So focusing on those types of things and small things that the certification companies can implement to kind of take some of the risk off of them as being the contamination risk.
Great. I think we, when you talk about personal hygiene, we have to mention your lovely statistics.
Yeah.
I'm tweeting them out. I hope you don't mind, because they're just so fantastically gross.
Not a problem. And that's one of the things that we don't really think about, right? Like, we take a shower and we wash our hair and we do all of these things. And even after we do that, we're still covered. So
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, it helps. And for some people that don't really know what kind of, microbiome that lives on us, like it's there all the time and we're not getting rid of it. So with sterile compounding, we're just trying now to mitigate what
Right.
goes on.
Here, let me read them. There's 6 of them. We shed about 9 pounds of dead skin cells each year. Particles act as transport vehicles for microorganisms and introduce them into the compounding process. I'd like to talk a little bit about that one. Human skin is home to more than 1,000 species of bacteria. A square inch of human skin contains 50 million bacteria on oily surfaces like the face, and the number can ramp up to 500 million. Each of us carries 2 to 6 pounds of bacteria, and bacterial cells outnumber human cells 10 to 1. I mean, those are really crazy statistics when you spell them out. And it makes me think, I don't know if you've done this. We have a lot of Korean spas near us, and I don't really do a lot of massages, but my favorite thing to do is this skin scrub. And you're completely naked on this vinyl, like the size of a massage table,
Yeah.
and they've got these gloves on, and they like scrub all the skin off of you. And I mean, and then what they do is they take this bucket of water and they'll like slough you off, and you can see all the skin. It's disgusting, but you feel so good afterwards. And all I could think of is when you're saying about the shedding all of all the dead skin cells. I'm like, I gotta go do that more regularly.
No, that sounds great.
Yes, but what do you mean when you say particles act as a transport vehicle for microorganisms and introduce them into the compounding process?
Sure. So the microbes don't kind of just exist by themselves, right? So they're attached to things and they're likely coming off of us on our skin. So they're attaching to our skin and they're flaking off in the cells that come off. So we're constantly shedding skin, which means we're constantly shedding bacteria. So that's how these things are going to get into the compounding environment. And we don't, for regular run-of-the-mill sterile compounding, we're not like covered head to toe where there's no skin showing. So even though we do our best, we're still going to run the risk of contaminating the environment slightly.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then let's talk a little bit about the garbing. Where was my question that I had about it? You talk a bit about properly fitting garbing in the article.
Yeah.
Is there anything that should be considered regarding the quality of what you're putting on, or the quality of the garb?
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I touch on in the article is that when we have certifiers or other vendors come in, some of them might be really, really tall and really, really big individuals. And a lot of times the pharmacy doesn't have stuff that's going to fit them. And it's the pharmacy's responsibility to have garb that's going to fit whoever comes in. So a conversation really needs to be had between the vendor and pharmacy, like, hey, what do we have to fit your staff? The other side of that, though, is that the quality of the garb ends up also being really important. So not only does it fit properly, but is it made for clean room use? A lot of times we see, and you've seen them now, right? Like if you go into the hospital or the doctor's office, people have isolation gowns on where they close in the back. So they're trying to avoid like splashing of things on them, but that's really not what we're looking for from a clean room standpoint. So wearing an isolation gown that you wear in other places, like in a hospital, is not going to meet the needs for the compounding facility and helping mitigate some of this contamination risk. So looking for clean room grade stuff, and for non-hazardous compound, the gown can close in the front, and that's totally cool. And kind of that better Tyvek-y type material is going to help funnel particles down to the floor, which is where we want them, instead of an open back gown, which would have them just kind of floating off your body as you walk by. So the quality of the gown really makes a big difference for sure.
Okay. And then, so what you're saying, so when you're setting up an appointment, or you're setting up the appointment for the vendor to come in, you're saying that's when you should have this initial conversation. Like, can I have your size so we make sure that we have the proper attire for you to come in?
Yeah, absolutely. Like as you're getting things set up with the certifier to come for their visit, kind of gauge like, because look, There's a really good possibility that most of your compounding staff are going to fit in, let's say, like small, medium, and large stuff. And then you get your vendor that comes in and needs like a 3XL gown, like, and it's not something you normally carry. You want to know so that you can accommodate their needs. And that just circles back to even what USP 797 says, that it's like, hey, it's your responsibility to maintain the environment in that clean room, which indirectly means you've got to put the right garb on who's ever coming in as a vendor.
So what would you say to a vendor that's coming in that maybe doesn't fit, or how do you politely say, or if they say, no, I'm fine, I got this, I do this all the time, how would you say to best approach that?
Yeah, so the vendor wants to be open with, hey, this is not going to fit and this could be an issue. And being very open with that's important, because if their escort at the pharmacy says, don't worry about it, just kind of put on whatever fits and you go about business, well, now you had permission to go in there like that. And it's, again, back on the pharmacy that if, the EM doesn't turn out great, it's because you weren't provided the right garb. So the most important part out of all of this is that open communication between certifier or whatever other vendor and the pharmacy. Like, hey, it's okay to say, what you have isn't going to fit me. What can we do about it? And, maybe then you can't have a visit that day. Like, that's unfortunate and it's super hard to schedule stuff, but it's better that than getting EM results back that are going to kind of tank everything. And now you have to do an investigation.
Right. So it's a matter of the cost benefit ratio.
Yep.
It stinks trying to get a new appointment, but it's a lot that's less time than doing the whole.
It's a lot less work in the long run, for sure. Yeah.
Okay, so what recommendations do you have for our pharmacy audience on managing the certification process?
Number one is have an open conversation. I've mentioned this a couple times now, but know what you're getting from them too, right? So part of it is asking, what services do you provide? What can you do for us? But then get into asking about their SOPs too. Like, have an understanding about how they're going to bring their stuff in, which they should be following the pharmacy SOPs anyway. But the challenge with that is, like, their cart or their other materials are going to have to be wiped down. And sometimes it's really hard to wipe stuff down like that. But, circling back to some of the behavioral aspects of things is talk to the certifier about whether or not they already have SOPs in place with certain behavior expectations on site. If they do, that should really put some of the pharmacy's kind of concerns to rest. That these technicians that are coming in know how to properly behave in this environment. Now, that does not let pharmacy off the hook of escorting whoever is coming in there and still overseeing the process. But SOPs and training are one of the things that pharmacy wants to make sure that certifier has available to all of their staff.
Okay, excellent. Is there anything else that you wanted to emphasize in terms of the SOP? Sorry, I'm looking at the article, so in case everybody's wondering, the dual screens. You've got a wonderful list of personal hygiene related suggestions and general behavior suggestions. And I'm just wondering if there's something that you see that you really think is worth, or that you wrote that you really think is worth emphasizing. Because I'm sure you've got a lot of people who regularly do the shower daily, use a moisturizer. I didn't realize that would help. Freshly laundered clothes, cleanable pharmacy dedicated shoes. Is that a regular thing that people already know?
So some of the pharmacies have that in place, but it's not something that's super common for the certifiers to be doing. And, you mentioned, I think the clothing and the shoe cleanliness is one of the biggest things that the certifiers really want to focus on and emphasize, the owners of the companies to, like, their staff, because it was a couple years ago, but I was on site when someone from a certification company was going to do EM. And I turned to the pharmacy director and I'm like, I wouldn't let them in there. Like, based on what they had on clothing and shoe wise, I would not have let them in my clean room to do the sampling. So
why? What did you see? What were they wearing?
It was work boots that were totally not clean and something that I would want in my clean room, jeans that were dirty, and they had on, their business polo shirt. But I get that they do mechanical things while they're on site and they're working, but just their presentation and their clothing cleanliness is really something that is so key, that if the pharmacy doesn't already require them to change into like hospital or facility dedicated scrubs, you're risking contamination. So pharmacy kind of has to be that stopgap of, if they show up and they're not looking like you really want them in there, don't let them in. And that's something that can be worked out ahead of time from a contract standpoint of like, these are our expectations. And if you're not meeting them, you're not coming in to do the work today. So,
right. Okay, good. I've got the pharmacy shoes. Do not enter the controlled compound environment with skin irritations, healing tattoos, or respiratory illness. Let's talk about skin irritation a little bit. I know that's a little bit random, but somebody like me, I have eczema, so I always have a skin irritation.
yeah.
And then, psoriasis is also, I used to know a girl who had psoriasis on her face and things like that. So what do you do in that situation?
And that's one of the biggest challenges that kind of pharmacy faces with how they handle some of that, because it's a very kind of delicate situation. It's conditions that people have. Things that are going to be like under like clothing, it's not so much of a huge concern. It's more things that are going to be on like bare skin. So from the forearm down, the neck, the face, and then that's really balancing how much of an irritation it really is, right? Like, so if it's something that's a little bit irritated, not really flaking, not really shedding, it's probably okay. If it's major outbreak of eczema, you're not going to be able to enter the clean room. So again, the certifier really wants to be open and honest about their condition, because if for some reason they enter and the EM results are bad because of it, this could have been prevented. So it's a tough thing. And I know that certifiers are short-staffed right now, and they're trying to get out and they're trying to get the work done. The pharmacy wants them in there to get in and get the work done. But at the end of the day, they would much rather cancel and postpone than have to spend a lot of extra time and money trying to do an investigation for something that was as silly as a, skin irritation.
Yeah. Okay. Wait, I just had a question and I totally went out of my head. We have a question. Is there a link for the SOP you're referring to?
So there's not really a link to the SOP, I guess.
Can I post the article in my on my thing? Okay, so I'll post the article. Do we have any other questions? Okay. All right, great. Any last and final tips for our people?
Look, at least for the pharmacy folks that are watching here, it's your clean room. So you set the rules, you make sure that they're following what they need to do, and be an advocate for what you actually need. And it's okay to kind of say like, hey, no, that's not going to work. It does help, though, to have all of that in writing before you get too far into the process ahead of time.
Okay, excellent. Well, everybody who came and participated, thank you very much. I will post that article on my LinkedIn thing where it says, or on the Pharmasalon page where it says articles. And have a great day and a great holiday.
All right, great. Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.